All right, Mayor, we're live.
All right.
No, this is a definition, and I'm actually going to table it. She got stuck in the Chick-fil-A line, and she said she'd be 3 minutes late, so.
She should call me. I'd give her a police escort.
She showed up with a nugget
Not
tray.
for that.
She better have a big old nugget tray.
For the first one.
We have to have
It could be at the next one.
Yeah.
Just like if they
Someone say I was getting it?
Nuggets?
No.
It's head on 7.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order without any Chick-fil-A from the deputy clerk. It's already live,
Oh, wonderful, thank
so
you.
that's on record as us saying that. So. There's a fly.
Is that a B?
I don't think so, B. It's we're doing. All right, because if you stand, invocation, you may stand for the pledge. Doug, will you lead us?
You'll bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for all the many blessings that you give us. We thank you for the opportunity to live in the United States and have all the freedoms and things that we have here. We thank you for this town and what it means to all of us, and we pray that you'll help us to make decisions that benefit this town and its citizens. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is the approval of the minutes for the August 13th work session meeting and the August 17th regular meeting. You had these in your packet. I hear a motion to approve.
Mayor, I have a correction, if
Correction.
you want to call it
Okay.
that. On the regular minutes, you know, it was noted that one item as related to the rents was moved from one number to the other. And I want it stated in the minutes why it was moved. And I asked that it be moved because I had constituents present and they wouldn't have to sit during that whole meeting.
Correct.
So I would like the minutes to reflect that. And then there was some discussion about the rents for the people that were currently in those apartments. I would like to see that in the minutes, what was said about that.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you would like to make that motion with the correction as a motion?
Yes.
Motion to approve the minutes with those additions?
With the following corrections.
Okay.
Mhm.
You've heard that. Motion, I hear second.
Second.
Any additional comments, additions, corrections? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Greathouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Yes.
Councilmember Head.
Yes.
All right, next is the adoption of the agenda. Anything to move, strike?
Mayor, if it pleases the council, I would ask that item 3 be moved up to number 1 so that our city engineer can get out of here. I'd also ask that item 4 be tabled. That modification to chapter 98 requires a public hearing prior to consideration for the council. And then I would ask that items 6 and 7 be swapped, as 6 is dependent upon the successful adoption of 7.
Okay. You've heard these changes. Do I hear a motion to approve these changes or any questions?
I'll make that motion.
We got a motion, I hear a second.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Call for it.
Councilmember Greathouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Yes.
Councilmember Head.
Yes.
Okay. Now we move to the city attorney's report.
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
All right. City clerk's report.
I just wanted to do a little date reminder. So tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. in this exact meeting room, we're going to be having a community meeting. It's really going to be more like a town hall, open discussion. Questions are more than welcome to be asked. And it's going to be regarding the permitting process through the city, code enforcement, and property maintenance. So we reached out and kind of invited a lot of landlords in the area and property owners.
What time's the meeting?
6 o'clock.
So everyone's invited to attend that.
It is an open public meeting.
We just kind of reached out to the ones that had the most houses that owned.
Correct.
So general information, property maintenance, we're gonna cover some issues regarding trash, curbside pickup, plan review, permitting, building inspection, and property maintenance.
Well, if I may, Mayor, in the future, when we plan something like this here, let me know ahead of time instead of the day before.
This was sent out last week.
Well,
Email wouldn't.
And text.
well, okay, well, I need to get a look ahead of time then. I'm sorry.
Is that all from the city clerk?
Yes, sir.
Now today we have the privilege of our city engineer being here for the city engineer's
I
report.
come upon request. Well, we've got a lot going on, as I'm sure you know. I'm not sure if Russell's mentioned this to council as it's been delayed now, but we are pursuing some additional grant funding for the city to be able to be utilized for utility work. And this is grant money that's kind of part of this ARPA money that we've already received some of the funding in several months ago. And the final round of that is a competitive round that we're planning to go out on the city's behalf and under a competitive procurement for more grant dollars. We're still working on the project scopes, but it's pretty exciting. I think we could see a sizable grant portion end up coming to the city if we're successful. So besides that, the USDA projects are moving slowly along. This is the wastewater plant upgrades or rehabilitations, and the main pipeline that services most of town going down to the town branch wastewater treatment facility. Rock has been a major issue. So we knew it would be, and we budgeted a fair amount of money within the contract to take care of rock, but we are, that is a day-to-day discussion about how to deal with it. The previous contractor, way back when, set the pipe right on top of blue granite, and some of that pipeline actually had grade going in the wrong direction in their effort to avoid having to blast rock. So we're making decisions every day on how best to mitigate it, but and always to the benefit of the city financially, but it is tough slugging in a couple of these spots. So working on the next round of sidewalk improvements for the city and several other projects. If there's more interest, I can go on.
Anybody have any other questions for Trey while he's here?
Trey, when you look at all the infrastructure improvements that we've had in the last couple of years and what's coming up, what's just the ballpark figures for the amount of grants?
Oh boy.
3 million?
No, it's way more than that. We have $3 million just in USDA.
Oh, okay.
So with GFA, we've had what, Russell? Probably another
Put it at
3 or 4,
Yeah.
5 million. Yeah. You said 5 total or GFA?
So we got 3, you got $1 million in
Yeah.
one Georgia, you got
That's true.
750 plus another 5 in CDBG, and then all of your principal forgiveness loans.
I mean,
So
it's 5 to 7.
That's great.
5 to 7 million. Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just in the last 4 to 5 years, I would guess.
That's great.
And they keep printing it. We're going to keep going after it, you know. So
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mayor, for clarification, and I believe it's included on your agenda, but the agenda that was sent to the public, I believe, did not include items 10 and 11. So for formality, I'll ask that we acknowledge those agenda items. The first being the acceptance of bids for the 2 police trucks. We opened those bids Friday. And then item 11 is authorization of expenditure for some fencing we're having to do out at Hannah's Mill. Like I said, it is on your agenda here, but the one that was publicized, it was not. So for formalities, I would ask that council acknowledge those agenda items. So, okay,
You all good with that?
Yes.
So we can leave that in the form of a motion?
please.
So I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Motion here, second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Greathouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reed.
Yes.
Councilmember Webb.
Yes.
First item for council's discussion is discussion potential authorization of award for our 2021 paving project. Your attachment is headed G3, and it's a recommendation of award from our city engineer who's in attendance. As you'll see here, there were 5 bids on the project, with the low bid being $1,295,704.25, which was submitted by Quality Construction of McElroy. You have a copy of the tabulation there that denotes all of the bidders and the items that were included there too. I've asked the city engineer just to speak a little bit about the contract and the specs that were put out. We had some issue with paving last year, all within the parameters of the bid, but we did realize some issues, particularly with milling, roads being left unpaved for a specific amount of time. And because the apparent low bid and the engineer's recommendation for tonight includes that contractor, I wanted the city engineer just to brief the council on the intricacies that have been built into the spec to mitigate some of the issues that we experienced last year. Trey?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you just kind of the way paving has gone in the city as long as I've been around. And we've done several projects over the last several years. Pretty well under Mr. Comiskey's leadership, there was a rollout of paving projects that went, I don't know, maybe 3 in a row over several years that I was involved with. And then more recently under Mr. Thompson's leadership, we've done several. GDOT, as with most paving projects, the engineering standard is to reference GDOT specs, and that's the way we've pretty well lived through. We've provided detailed specifications always with the backdrop of referencing GDOT, so standard specs that we've developed with that caveat. The means and methods is always something that we trend away from, trying to set demands within a specification about how it's to be built, and it gets real tricky as you start to do it. But never have we had a project go quite the way last year's went, whereby many of you, if not all of you, were getting complaints multiple times per day in your districts. And I will say that that was as much a troublesome issue on me as it was you. I know you were taking it firsthand, but we take it pretty serious that we do not want disruption to your districts if we can help it. That said, for this next project, we took into account every single complaint that we heard about and tried to write in measures whereby those issues could not be could not happen again moving forward. So I'm going to work through just a couple of these with you because I think you'll find that, okay, this makes sense. GDOT does in high priority emergency type of scenarios right into their contracts a special provision which is called a cover-up policy. And what that basically means is once you go to mill that surface, you have a certain period of time that you must have it covered up and paved final. And what that creates is a scenario where what happened last time is not able to happen, which is the milling person comes to town and they want to mill the entire town that at one time and leave. So that's very cheap for that particular subcontractor to come once and do it all and then leave town. When we put a cover-up policy in place, It increases price, but what it requires is that miller has to be always kind of working along with the paving contractor, which requires many more mobilizations and much more attention to the project, if you will. It does increase price, that's a fact. But Mr. Thompson said, look, we need to spend the money to get this done where it's not so disruptive. So we put in a 5-day cover-up policy with liquidated damages, meaning if they don't meet it, then they will pay extra money back to the city for any issues that would arise from that. Or you don't have to prove the issues. They just, the clock starts rolling, and in every case, they have to have it covered back up in 5 days, or we start charging them damages, so to speak. So that was placed into the specification. Another item that was added into the project last time that seemed to help was the police department got out and worked as a flagger, so to speak, on the project, directing traffic. And we basically just worked that into the last job, and this time we put an allowance in the job whereby we could do that and have the police department involved, which seemed to calm down the complaints a little bit as far as, well, it was handled better, but the PD did a great job. And number two, it seems that people are happier if the police department is flagging people around their detour. Finally, the manhole adjustment has been an issue every paving project we've done. I mean, it's one of those things where no matter what, somehow, whether it's the lids don't fit quite right when we go and put them down or they switch them out, I think we finally got this right where what happens is if you're coming through a milling off the top coat with the machine, you don't want to hit the manhole covers. So we've got to drop them down, then mill, and then you've got a bump there. And so that each one of these steps, the contractor struggled to get it done in a way that did not cause hardship. So this time we gave every single bit of information that had to be, and we basically got into the means and methods of how this had to happen. And we've come up with it where there should be no bumps at any time due to manholes. And thereby, we've kind of mitigated that issue. We think we've got the flagging issue with the PD worked out. This cover issue, while it costs money, is certainly affordable. And we were within $5,000 of our projection on this job. So it was, everything came back, and that was with added roads. So everything came back where we think we've got a good project. Finally, there's been some concern about McElroy and whether or not they should be selected as the low bidder. And I just want to caution council is that Russell and I got together before the bid, and there's only so many paving contractors out there. At the time, I was calling and soliciting anyone in the greater Thomaston area to come out and please bid this job, because we just had McElroy and Coggins doesn't do paving. They were subbing 100%. McElroy does the paving part, but subs out the milling and some of the other work. So we were in a bit of a jam trying to find, can we get people to compete on this job? So I just want to caution you that, the project cleaned up towards the second half, or at least the last third of the project, I believe. Maybe there's counters to that thought. I do think that we put McElroy on notice that we want this to go very smoothly. They agree that the changes I made to the contract make it clear our intentions, where before it could be argued those weren't clear, so they were reading through, to trying to build the project as cheaply as they could. We feel like we've remedied that, but all in all, to kick a bidder out at this point as the low bidder, I just can't recommend it. I mean, I understand that if that's what council wants to do, that we'll obviously go with council's wishes, but really should have taken care of that beforehand. And when we were worried about bidders, that's not the time to do it. So hopefully that makes sense.
So did we not accept the low bid, the lowest bid?
We're asking you to accept it tonight, to accept the low bid.
Okay, but I thought that you were saying that there was some kind of confusion as it related to, as far as the low bid being there, as far as the city accepting the low bid.
No, I'm just trying to say that we would like to work with the low bidder in this case. That's my recommendation, just due to those reasons I gave. And so that's what we're kind of talking to you about, is here are the things we've done, because I know there was concerns over the contractor on the last job, and rightfully so. What I'm trying to say to you is, we feel like we've cleaned those issues up where no mistake could be made. And with that in mind, we do feel like, on my side of it, that we can recommend utilizing the contractor.
And just to clarify and add a point, mistakes will be made, but there are provisions in the contract that address it and mitigate the time frame by which the issue stays in existence.
Okay, as far as the city police involvement, how is that going to work, Chief? Is it someone that's on duty, or how would that work?
It's paid by the contracting company, and
Okay,
it's a special detail. So it'll be off-duty officers getting paid through the contractor, which is what we did last time, and it was very beneficial to the officers, and they signed up for it.
And very beneficial to the project, was my assessment. After they came on board, things really got a lot better. So what we did is have that built into the number you see before you. That is part of the contract already.
Mayor, staff's recommendation concurs with the city engineer's recommendation that the low bid be awarded to McElroy, quality construction by McElroy, in the amount of $1,295,704.25.
Make a motion to approve as recommended.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion, further discussion? Time frame for when they start to when they should be through?
We are pushing to get it through before it gets too cold in the winter, and they're thinking that they may be 3 to 4 weeks from being able to start the project once awarded. So we're pushing. We asked them last week, assuming that y'all would meet and approve, to go ahead and start scheduling.
And is it their discretion on priority, like which street goes first or whatever? I mean, kind of, I don't know how that works.
They're not exactly. They will have, there's certain types of processes that will be joined together naturally, where we're milling, where we're doing full depth reclamation. Some of that might stage it up. Last time, a lot of discussion about schools and how to work around those. We don't have quite as much of that in this job, so we'll have a pre-construction conference and we'll kind of iterate back and forth.
Yeah, one thing that I do want to bring out that Trey and I have been discussing is regarding EPA's new lead rule. So my understanding is that we have to have the entire city's water service tested within, 3 years? And what that means is when we check the service, if it's a certain type of pipe, we actually have to dig back to the tap. And if that tap is made with lead, it has to be replaced. Ultimately, what that means is if that water tap for that service to that house is in the middle of a road, meaning my water main's in the middle of the road versus in the sidewalk, I'm going to have to dig that road up. Every single place there's a resident tapped in there that has a lead fitting. So what I've asked Trey to do is some exploring based on the age of the house and the estimated age of the service to get me an identifier on that project, because what I do not want to do is to pave a road and then within the next 3 years I've got to come back and dig up in front of every house where that service is made. So if for some reason we find out that on one of these paving routes I have a potential for some lead taps, we're either going to try to mitigate that prior to paving, or we're going to have to figure out some sort of strategy. But ultimately, I don't want to have to dig them up. And this is a rule that they put in place this year, and it's affecting every water system.
Certain size water systems, but it affects you.
Yeah. So, just
I'd like to know that I had talked to Mr. Thompson and inquired about Triumph Mill Road as far as when it would be paved. And my thing was, I said it was only half of the street was done. But Mr. Thompson let me know that there were other roads or streets that were just half done. And so I guess whenever it is you all sit down and determine how you're going to pave it, I would like to know where Triumph Mill Road is. Once you all sit down and discuss when you're going to pave what.
absolutely.
That'd probably be a good one if it was paving during fall break, then maybe a good week to do it. Because with school right there, I don't know, that would be discussed in the pre-construction thing. All right,
Mayor, the next item,
we had to
A call for
vote,
vote.
call for a vote.
Councilmember Greathouse,
All right.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Yes.
Councilmember Head.
Yes.
Mayor, the next item for council's consideration is the approval of community development rent rates. The matter was discussed at previous council meeting, and it was tabled, and my recommendation to the body is, in light of any changes that are made tonight, I'm going to default back to the current rates and fill the current unit at those rates. We heard from Ms. Allen at the Housing Authority. She provided council a copy of HUD's standard fair market rate and then the low to mod rate, which is 80% of the fair market, and that information is headed G1. There was some thought about the sustainability long-term based on the current rate structures. So the matter is up again for council's consideration and debate. If I may introduce a suggestion, obviously it's just a suggestion, would be that any vacant structures like the ones we have now be filled at the 80% methodology, and that those that are currently under leases be granted some leniency, either that be 1 year or 2 years, and then eventually transitioned into a chained HUD publicized rate at the 80% fair market value, meaning that the rates would automatically change on January 1st of the ensuing year based on the HUD publication. However, for current tenants, that not be effective for at least a year, and even up to 2 years, depending on council's pleasure. But obviously, you set the rents. That was just a suggestion. But my preference would be that at some point that rent structure be chained to something practical and documentable.
So listed here as far as a 2-bedroom, it says $536, so are you suggesting that be the rate for a 2-bedroom?
Yes, ma'am. So the vacancy we have now is a 2-bedroom, and that rent, so we would fill it at $536, and then across the board for all of our units that we phase in, whether that be an annual phase in or a 2-year phase in, to the HUD publicized rates.
I don't think that apartment is worth $536. I went today along with you and Mr. Tucker, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but I don't think they're worth $536. The old the stove and the refrigerator, those items look off, and I just don't think they're worth $536. I fear they're more than worth more than $350, but I do not think they're worth $536. And that one we looked at today was pretty much one of the recent ones. I don't know what it is they're worth, but I don't think they're worth $536. Just looking at that empty one today. What were your thoughts, Mr.
Well, I really don't have a comparison. I looked at that one unit, so to compare it to be fair, to make a fair comparison, I'd have to compare it to something. And if that means other properties that are managed by the Housing Authority to have a comparable 2-bedroom to 2-bedroom, I couldn't say, and to be fair. So, with that said, I certainly, I'm with you. I think it's more than what we're currently getting.
Yeah.
But I think I don't want to put words in Russell's mouth, but there is no transparent, documentable methodology that is being used. If somebody said, well, what are your rents? And then we say, well, it's X. Well, how'd you come up with that? Well, we just came up with it. I mean, to me, to have something that is, handled by federal HUD, if you will, that they spent some time in pulling data, I mean, I think it's a pretty good source of information and a good benchmark, barometer, whatever you want to call it, in order to calculate a rent. And obviously, I would assume that it takes into account the tenant's income, because I think there's a calculation in there, because if they load them, they have to be low to moderate, right?
Well, the calculation, I think is broke out in your handout. So they determine what fair market is based on local demographics, and then they set the low to mod number at 80% of fair market. So
But for how do we, and I'm not saying they're not, I'm just for my information, how do we know they're low to mod?
with the people that are living there.
Yes, the tenants.
We have no parameter that governs that.
And I'm not saying they're not, please don't misunderstand. I'm just saying, if we're gonna do something, I mean, we need to gather information, so, you know, we can say that we did. And so we can, if it's low to mod, then it's low to mod, let's do it. But, you know, if not, you know, I think there needs to be a test, at least at every, I don't know what that test looks like, it's certainly at application, and then maybe at every time, are they 12-month or 24-month leases?
Current leases are 24 months.
If you do it once a year, is that fair? I don't know. But we don't really have any kind of methodology, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And
If we went up to the 536, that every year it would adjust, up or down, right?
Sometimes it goes up, sometimes.
But it would adjust every year.
Even to the people who are already renting, it would adjust.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would advise some sort of phase in is
Certainly.
preparatory
Right,
to come on.
right. And in what,
And you can see here it actually went down in 2021.
Ms. Lakeith, it sounds like you're saying that you're looking at the apartment, not so much the low to moderate income side of it, but it sounds like you're looking at the apartment and saying, I don't believe that apartment should rent for that much. It's sort of separate from the issue of the income of the person renting it.
Right, I went today and looked at the apartment that's for rent now. And the gentleman has gone in and cleaned up and painted and did all the repairs or whatever that needed to be done to the unit. And after all that's been done, I don't think the unit's worth $536. The appliances in there are awful. The appliances are awful. The cabinets, some of those are awful. I guess people would go in and put in their own paper, whatever, to cover the cabinets. But the cabinets look awful. I don't think they're worth $536.
So all the what appliances are included? Refrigerator,
it's a gas stove,
gas stove,
and a refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
gas. How many have gas?
Well, I think when they
Changing them out.
when they go down and they break, they replace them with electric.
Right.
From what I understand.
Yeah, that's what
See,
I said.
You know, just as an illustration of recurring expense, if you figure based on the number we're going to factor in tonight for cabinet replacement and assuming $500 per appliance, at $350 a month, you would have to rent the unit for over 2 years just to break even.
And I'm agreeing that they're worth more than $350, but I do not think it's worth $536. All those old appliances and all such as that in there, the cabinets. I don't think it's worth $536.
Is it?
Would that not be a derivative of market value? I mean, if we list it for $536 and we can't fill it, we know we have an issue. If it fills next week,
Maybe so. I thought somebody was already supposed to be getting that particular unit, is my understanding.
they have someone in waiting. I
Right.
don't know if they've dropped out or not.
Okay, right. But and regardless of what it is, I still say it's not not worth $536. The appliances are awful for one thing. All of that.
And that may be the case, but I personally don't have anything to compare it to.
Right.
So, I mean, if I could see something and just look at it side by side and say, yeah, you know, go through a checklist, I think it needs to be equitable to the tenant, it needs to be equitable to the city taxpayer. You know, that's a balancing act, and so,
I'm seeing mill houses in for $700, 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
And mid houses, and we not comparing, community development to the mid house.
what other, I mean, I guess tri-unit mill, I mean, we could, do they have a 2-bedroom unit over there?
Yeah, they do have 2-bedroom units.
Is it possible to see one of those and kind of, you look at square footage, look at appliances, things like that, and just cabinet, you know, whatever your criteria are.
I would love to look at if we're gonna compare it to.
I mean, I don't know what's out there.
That's what started in the first place. So yes, let's look at a two-bedroom unit out there. I think they go through and they get rent money and they fix it up, buy new appliances and all such as that in those rooms.
But I guess we need to make a decision on this one tonight as far as.
Not operating on assumptions, but based on the fact that we asked the housing authority to make a recommendation and that they manage similarly equipped properties, my understanding was that there was some basis in similarity based on the recommendation.
And Russell, are these people that are the applicants, have they seen the unit?
I do not know.
Was this one marketed at 536 to the prospective tenant?
It was not marketed at a
We used
rate. When she called me, she asked me, what do you want to rent it for?
I see.
And I said, well, I need to go to the city council if they want to make a change. So in absence of some determination by the body, the rents that still stand per ordinance are at $350. So in absence of making a change, I'm going to tell her to fill it at $350.
I guess I'm hesitant to do that based on the fact that I think we all agree they're worth more than $350. And again, going back to the balancing act between the tenant and the city taxpayer, I don't think that I can feel comfortable with that.
I'm kind of like when Russell said, you know, start marketing it at the 536, recommended. If it doesn't get filled, then we go, okay, it must be too high. But if somebody jumps on 536, it must not be too high if they're willing to pay 536.
Maybe they're willing to pay it, but have they seen the unit?
Right, I mean, they would see it before, yeah, I mean, they would definitely look at it before they would rent it.
So Russell, is that the way they would do it? They have multiple applicants and it looks like there's a financial, financial qualification showing that they're financially able to meet the rate. If they come in, do they have the opportunity, they come in and look at the unit and say, yes, I want this unit for this price, right?
I can't comment on the particular protocol because she didn't tell me that. Just in general practice, I don't know of anyone who would rent a unit without looking at it.
Yeah, I agree. And I see the point. We've got multiple people wanting to rent. And what JD's saying is that, if they look at it and we get turn downs at that rate.
It's similar to the selling the police trucks. I mean, we've stuck them out there and we didn't know what they was going to get, and we might want to sell new ones we buy at that price, the way they're going.
Certainly the market will determine the value.
That's that's America.
Yeah.
I mean, if nobody rents it at 536, I think we go back and go.
Am I allowed to comment? So I work with HUD in Monroe, Louisiana. So the way HUD works is the client, the applicant would have to qualify. If you were to adopt the HUD standards, the applicant would have to qualify first. Basically, they have to qualify based on their income level for the unit, and then they would be invited to see the unit. We wouldn't want to put someone in there that's that's overqualified. So if it says the qualification is a $27,000 median income per year, we have to pull their, based off what they submit, so their pay stubs essentially for X amount of years, and you basically there's a calculation you would do to determine their income for that year, and if it falls in a range, then they would be eligible for that unit, and then they would look at the unit to assess, okay, I want this unit at this rate.
Not get too deep in the weeds, but I'm sure if they didn't, and it was lower than that, then I guess that's where the Section 8 type vouchers come into play. Is that correct?
I believe the property is submitted on behalf of the entity for the program.
Okay.
And then HUD comes in, they have to do inspections and all that, and if it meets the qualifications, then vouchers can be submitted.
Right.
We're moving on.
Well, unless there's a motion to, is there a motion to set it at this until?
Can we see, let the market determine where, I mean, if this is where the HUD guideline is, and like Russell said, I would, excuse me, like to assume that was, competing properties were taken into account when it.
And that's not saying we have to change the other ones yet.
Right.
We can look at this and see, it rents in 2 days, and hey, we're looking at.
But I guess, I know we got to have some kind of basis.
Yeah, just pulling the number out of the air is kind of. Are you making that as a motion?
So is the discussion, is the point you're making is that we go ahead and set the rate on this one?
On this one, and don't, until we see, we don't come back later on the other ones, correct? We don't have to make that determination tonight.
This is the only vacant one right now.
This is the only vacant
Well, I
one.
think there's another one coming
But
up
if there's
on that man.
any vacant ones, I guess you'd make them,
Yeah.
any vacant ones until we,
Yeah. I mean, I make a motion that we go with the recommendation to see where it's at, but have the flexibility to adjust it should it not work.
we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
On this one?
On this one,
Any vacancies? Is it just this one or any vacancies?
I mean, I don't know if the other one's in what the status of that 3-bedroom is. I mean,
I believe the previous tenant passed away.
they haven't got the keys yet, the man was saying,
Yeah,
so it's,
it may be a while.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
For this one, we got a
this
motion.
one.
We got a motion and a second to set this as 80% of the HUD rate for this one vacant property right now.
Which is the 536.
You're at 536 for the 2-bedroom. Is there any motion say any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Greathouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
No.
Councilmember Head.
Next item for council's consideration is authorization of expenditure for the replacement of cabinets for community development properties. You have attached with your packet headed G2 quotation that was submitted by the Housing Authority for the work to be completed. So this is a per unit price on your sheet. So per unit it's $8,160. There are 9 units to be replaced. So staff's recommendation is to ask for an authorization to expend via the Housing Authority to cause this work to be completed in the amount of $73,440 for Hilltop Wood Shop to replace the cabinets in 9 units.
So this would be inclusive of the current vacant one?
No.
I do not know. I have a list. I don't have them here. She just told me it was 9 units. I don't know which.
No, those 9 units are on Drake Drive. Those 9 units are on Drake Drive, and those 9 units are the ones that were the first ones that were built over there. So that's what those 9 units are, right here in these areas.
The vacant one's on Park Street. This says Park Street, but
That's,
I thought the one we looked at was on Drake today.
It was.
I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Mhm.
So you don't think that,
Not those. Those on Drake are not the first ones that were built. It's on another drive of Drake Drive
Oh, I
that
got
the
you.
first ones were built in
Got
1982.
gotcha. I make a motion that we expend this money on a per unit basis as recommended.
Second?
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Greathouse.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Yes.
Councilmember Head.
Yes.
next item for council's consideration is discussion and potential action for the acquisition and purchase of a new pumper truck for our fire department. Pleases the mayor and council, I've asked the fire chief to come and give us a general update on the status of our current apparatus issues that we've been having with our pumpers, and then I've asked the finance director to put together some potential financing mechanisms, options, lease purchase, buy outright, et cetera, for council's edification so we can make some decisions. So Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, for our new pumpers and everything, between January 20th and September of 2021, the city has spent a total of $56,584 on repairs on our fire engines, and those are our pumpers. Our fleet pumpers are engine 1, which is 2005, is 16 years old. Engine 2, which is 2001, is 20 years old. We spent $12,000 on it, and transmission. It now has to have the electronic harness replaced, and they can't find one. It's still in the shop. It's been in the shop for 12 weeks now. On engine 3 is a 2007, which is 14 years old. These fleet of apparatus has served their time, and it's a time for us to begin a replacement plan on those apparatus. On our reserve unit, that is engine 3. ISO requires us to have a reserve unit in place and ready to go at all times. But our reserve unit right now also needs repairs. And the repairs on that is going to cost us about $3,000. I can't get our reserve unit to get in place to be repaired until we can get engine 2 back so it can go into our reserve. So we're in dire need of fire apparatus at this time. We have 7 different, I think, one had, I don't know whether they gave you the information on the prices, the packages, but the Pierce has 7 different body chassis that we have, and it's the Enforcer Puckett, pumper chassis, the Safer pumper chassis. We have 2 of the pucks, and the one that we was looking at, it mirrors battery line. It mirrors that apparatus. And the beginning quote was $668,000, and I've got them down to $643,000. The lowest price we have at this time is $580,000. But as all these units are available right now, all of the fire departments are looking at these units too, because they're already in service and they're ready to go. They take anywhere, because of COVID, they take anywhere up until 20 to 24 months to build a new unit now.
So this was not budgeted for?
Yes,
No,
it's
ma'am.
not budgeted for.
It wasn't.
No, ma'am, but due to equipment failure and the aging of our fleet, due to the fact with processor chips and build times and availability of vehicles, asked Chief to go out and see what was available. My understanding that one of the apparatus that was submitted lines up pretty much verbatim with the Pierce that we bought in terms of the electronics and everything as far as the operations. It normally would not bring you a capital expenditure of this magnitude without the proper budget protocol, but due to where we are, the amount of money that we've already expended, and the issue of maybe not having a fire truck if we get into build times, wanted to bring this to council forefront, and also with some options for your consideration and deliberation. Not asking for a decision tonight, but in the near future, if you find the request meets merit, that obviously, certainly in the near future, that we'd be able to take some action. So, Lonnie, would you like to go over
Sure.
GMA lease?
Yeah,
Sorry, Chief.
As far as the lead time on that, if our engine 3 goes down and ISO comes in for an inspection, you can look for our ISO rating to go back up. And that'll be a big hit to our business community and trying to draw in new businesses to this area.
So Russell, are you saying that 643 unit is the one that matches up?
Is that correct,
Yes,
Chief?
sir.
So what's the difference? So Remind me what's the difference between the Sabre and I guess the Enforcer series?
It's just the chassis, the different chassis. The Sabre is a little bit cheaper chassis than the Buck and the Enforcer.
Thank you.
So this 580,000 bid that was given, what is it, that doesn't include?
Well, that's what I just was asking.
It does not
that was-
include your foam tank built in. We would use an exterior foam tank. That would take a little bit more time to get your foam on your different electrical, grease, or gas fires that we might have.
And Chief, these are state contract pricing, right?
Yes, sir.
So that in itself would circumvent the need for a sealed bid because you're getting it on state contract.
All right. So when the chief approached us, you have the fire trucks there. She obviously was looking at the 667 one, which they dropped down to 643. And again, just to reiterate what Chief and Russell said, when I talked to the guy today, that one operates pretty much all the electronics just like our ladder truck. So guys could, your firemen could go, firemen and women could go straight in, which is an issue if you have one of the other trucks as well. That was one of the big things he was pushing. He did drop the price from 667 down to close to the other one, which was 633. So he got this one down to 643 for us. So what I did on this was take a look at a couple of options on what we could do if you wanted to pay for it. My concern with it, and again, this is a Russell thing and y'all thing, but if we got to wait 12 months on the lead time, it's kind of an issue, right? If we don't have them. Now these are stock trucks. But, matter of fact, when I asked him for the lease to buy on all three of them, he said he thought one of these, I think it was the cheaper one, might be gone.
Under contract.
Yeah, maybe under contract. So not saying they wouldn't have another one, but again, this thing changes every day. So the quicker we can make a decision, if we're gonna do something, the better off we're gonna be. So I put together something kind of quickly for you guys. I always try to keep it one page. The second page of this is a fire station that we'll get to later. I just wanted to just give you one handout. So on the pumper truck at 643, I contacted GMA Leasing, which is what we are paying the current ladder truck and a bucket truck and a street sweeper. We did a few years ago from GMA Leasing, and they gave me 24, 36, 48 months at pretty good interest rates, 1.04, 1.16, and 1.3. So you kind of see there, my thoughts were the 48 months you could get the truck for 660 instead of the 643. You're paying about 17,000 in interest. So Pierce also offered a lease option to purchase, but it was through PNC Bank that they had. It was quite a bit more, but I did confirm with Jeff with 10-8 when I spoke with him, that the sales guy, that they asked us to fill out a credit app. So this is without them seeing our credit app. GMA has our audit, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying, so the 293 sounds way off from GMA, but if they knew our audit and our credit app and all that sort of stuff, if we filled all that out, they may be comparable as well. And so then we asked him, we had some question and wanted to kind of put together a lease turn back in. So what they suggest if a city does a lease turn back in is we would run the lease for 84 months. You would essentially get the truck now, you would make 6 payments of $85,000, and then on the end of that 6th year, you would spec out your new truck for the end of the 7th year, take them 12 months to build it, and then you would roll. And essentially what they do is knock off what they think the residual value now of 202 comes off that purchase price before you ever get started. So instead of the 643, they'd essentially knock off the 202, so we would be paying 441 right now, and then you kind of go from there. So I tried to put all that out. So then I had the task of trying to put together a lease versus buy situation for you guys when I had 2 banker finance people on the board. So that was a huge help for them to sit here and look at my mistakes. But so when you're looking at lease versus buying, it can be very complicated, right? You're talking internal rates of return. Typically for private companies, we're talking tax rates, depreciation, all this sort of stuff. I tried to keep it pretty simple for us here and said, okay, what's the better deal of just kind of our money? Because we don't pay taxes. We do depreciation for our audit, but really and truthfully, in depreciation in the government world doesn't mean a whole lot, not like it does in the private sector. So I said, okay, if we keep the truck and I compare it, we buy the truck, you see that lease versus buy, keep truck, number one, we would pay the $660, and then if we did the lease, we would pay the $512 in lease payments, but then we need to buy the truck, so we're gonna pay the $202 balloon payment. So we save about $54,000 if we go ahead and buy it, and you save the same $54 if you turn it back in because you have the truck to sell at the end. So it's kind of funny how all that works out, but it typically does if you're not involved in interest rates. So then I said, okay, but that's not really why you lease a truck, right? So when you lease a truck, you're not trying to save money. You're willing to pay more for a car or something if you lease it. You don't want to deal with the maintenance. You don't want to mess with it. So my question was, how long of a useful life do we use and what do we do? So knowing that the chief's got two bumper trucks, one's 15 years old, one's 20, I asked her to calculate mileage. She said from last September to this September on one of them, they were about 5,600 miles, which I guessed 6,000. I think, Don, you and I talked about 6,000 today. So to me, you know, if you said, okay, we're going to try 15 year, and I don't know what a useful life would be, but if I use 15 years and said, look, we're going to make it to 100,000 miles, would be roughly 16 point something years at 6,000 miles a year, right? So if I use 15, you know, we're buying that truck for $660. Over that 15 years, we're going to be on our third lease truck if the payments were the same. So you save a bunch of money buying it, but you got maintenance on the old one. So that's, to me, is kind of your gamble, or what I put down here is your wager, right? So if you go this route, trying to figure out, are we going to spend more on maintenance of a truck, or do we do the lease where we turn it back in? I think, based on what I've seen, I went back. Now, I did not have the numbers that the chief had that what we spent this year. I had for the past 7 years on total vehicle maintenance, I think we spent $160,000 or something budgeted, you know, in our financials. But this year she spent more. We only had $20,000 total budgeted this year because we were spending so much on the ladder truck. When she and I got a ladder truck the last year or so, we dropped that down. I didn't realize the pumpers were causing us so much trouble. So, in my opinion, I think it's better that you buy. I think it's probably better that you go the GMA route. They're ready. You know, we would just let them know the terms and they would calculate the stuff for us if you wanted to go that route on anything. I asked, because these numbers were so different, I asked the salesman, I said, I need to understand why anybody would do a lease and turn back in at these rates. And he said, well, a lot of cities have trouble with the long-term planning, right? They worry about what's going to happen 20 years from now and not have the $1 million to buy a new fire truck. So they would rather just put $100,000 in there every year for a budget line item, and they don't have to deal with it. I think under our current situation with what we have in reserves and our fund balance, to me, it would make sense for us to buy it and try to get as many years as we could out of it. He also mentioned some cities drive them way more. I mean, if you were in, you know, Atlanta, right, you're going to drive it way more. He said they get a lot of it with ambulances because they're just constantly going, doing out-of-town stuff. It makes more sense to do a lease turn back in on something like that. So they'll do a lease turn back on 10 years. They'll do it on 5 years. They'll do whatever. He said it was normally on 7. So anyway, this was kind of where I came up with. I mean, my suggestion, if you were going to do this, would be something along that 48, month thing. We pay a monthly amount to GMA, and you could get it bought, but it's up to y'all.
When you say it's ready to go, the truck is ready to go?
Yeah, so these are stock trucks, right? Have you seen, did they bring this truck down? Weren't they gonna bring it
It's
or
in
not?
Illinois right now.
Yeah, so it's in Illinois, but it's ready to go. So if you said, hey, we want it tonight, we put an order in, I get the paperwork, some of y'all would have to sign for the GMA lease thing, right? But we'd fill out that application and roll, and it's my understanding they would lock the truck down.
6 weeks it could be here. They'll do the paint and everything. It's the same as the ladder
It
truck.
says 4 months delivery. It's on the 580. Let me see if it's
Yeah, I don't
the
know
same
which one they were.
Yeah, it says 2 months on the 643.
He was telling me, well, the paint, they'll get it to Georgia and they have a company in Georgia that does the paint and
Gotcha.
everything.
He said today they were all stock. We got them in stock. They're ready. These are at least ready to go.
Remind me, I know this is a little bit different than when we got the ladder truck originally. We bought it probably on a lease turn in, and I think it was the old ladder truck, not the new one, but the old one.
I'm not sure on that one.
Well, what I was saying was that it wasn't really made for Silvertown streets and everything, and there's a lot of people complaining about, you couldn't. Right, so I guess I want to make sure that if we went that route, that we're not running into the same thing versus a custom built, to where we're addressing some of those concerns that we.
That one is spec exactly like the ladder that we have now.
size of, well, I heard electronics and some of the phone stuff you
It's
said, but,
size, but not as big and not as high.
okay.
So
I just didn't, I knew you probably thought of that, but I just didn't want to run into the same issues that we had with the other one.
Yes.
And if we got this truck, is there one of the trucks that we would then sell? And if it was, is there any estimated amount of it?
There's very little. He mentioned to me,
Yeah.
that they had one the other day that was 15 to 20 years old, and he said, I think we sold it for 30 grand, 35,000. I mean, it's something, but it's not like it. Because I was kind of questioning the 202 number in the 7 years. I'm like, all right, so what's one worth at the end of it? And he said, yeah, that particular city was spending 40 or 50 a year on the truck, but it was worth $35,000. You know, he said there's not a lot to it. The one thing that Russell and I have been waiting on this and fighting is this, could we use part of the 1.6 that we already have of this ARP
That's what I
money?
was just about to ask.
Yeah, we're looking. So I had a call today with the GMA representative. We're still kind of waiting on definitive stuff from the state.
Did you bring those handouts?
Yeah, so for the police, yeah, so, you know, here's what we're getting. So I was on a call a month or so, this is a real 10,000 foot view, but I was on a call a month ago on the ARP money, but it was a federal call. So if you were a county or a big city, you got it straight from the feds. And so they were going over all the stuff. Well, we got our stuff through the state of Georgia because we were smaller. So we're kind of going to be held to the state of Georgia. Like, Georgia's going to have to report to the feds, we're going to report to what Georgia says. And it's kind of crazy. So yeah, they've said water and sewer and broadband, and then it talks about any negative economic impact or public health emergency stuff. So it doesn't really say. So I point blank today said, look, do you think if I held off on this, a fire truck would work? And they said, well, I know some cities are planning on putting police cars in there, so I don't know why a fire truck wouldn't work. But I think what's got to happen is we would have to show that, you know, this helps us with COVID calls. We use it to run EMS calls. It probably would help in the situation of
Well, it's an emergency in the sense of the reliability of the
Yeah.
other pump trucks that it's going to be replacing. I mean, with
Yes.
having a reserve.
Theoretically, if we operated under the auspice that our call volume had increased due to lack of response from ambulance service or whatnot,
right.
and that is to abate public health and safety because we're first responders and we got to respond. And so you write a check for the fire truck, gaming that the final rule will give you some clarification to reimburse yourself to where if you borrowed the debt, you can't pay off
Yeah,
debt.
see, that's the tricky part.
So if I write a check, can I reimburse myself? But in the event that I can't reimburse myself, could I then go back to GMA, give them title, and enter into some sort of lease?
That I don't know. I'd have to talk to GMA. I'm not sure. Because you're right. This
If it was a
basically,
cash flow issue.
This ARP money was they're really funny about paying off debt, especially debt you already had. Because our first question was we just wanted to pay off the fire station. Right? We wanted to pay it. Well, it's like, look, you already had that debt before this started. You got the bond. You're building the fire station. You can't pay it off. So again, you enter into GMA lease, we might not can do it. If we scratch a check for it out of our reserves, we can reimburse ourselves. But like Russell said, are we then giving up these cheap rates to pay it out over time?
Why not just go ahead and write it out to ARP now and just, and if they say no, you can't do that, then we'll get the.
Then you figure it out from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, can you finance
I'll
it
find it.
after you have title?
I don't know. I'd have to call GMA and say, look.
I think you probably would be able to.
Yeah, you would. I mean, clarify with GMA, but I wouldn't see
Yeah,
there's
so
no debt
what-
on it.
Yeah, the problem is the laws on borrowing money on equipment and stuff in Georgia. Remember, you can't, unless it's a bond or something, you can't have a loan over a year long.
Well,
So
that's
they
why you
have
do a
to
lease.
physically hold the
Title.
title like you were leasing it. So I don't know if you could do that after the fact, but I'll ask them. I mean,
Yeah,
take a quick phone call tomorrow to find
I
out.
mean, I'm sure that, you know, in your banking life, Doug, I mean, we've done some leases for other municipalities as a bank, and, you know, that obviously, it was a leasing type program, and
Right.
it's, you know, given you can't indebt future councils or commissioners, I mean,
Right.
there was a way with GMA to do it.
Yeah, I don't,
So
now
it's-
you would think there would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
if we're under the auspice of it being a health concern, and it sounds like we've got a true concern should these things not function.
We-
Exactly.
We're cautiously optimistic that they would accept the argument. with a caveat, they have not released the final rule,
Yeah.
and we cannot give you a guarantee that that will be an eligible expenditure.
Do we have the money now?
We got 1.6
We got
million.
1.6 million right now.
What Russell said earlier, Chief and I can confirm unequivocally that the call volume is up because of ambulance service.
I think
They're
we'll
running
do it.
more medical.
We'll figure it out.
We were to
That's
some extent, they're
documentable. We
running-
could submit
sure.
that.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
They tell us it's not eligible, we have to go,
We'll
we're
reimburse
either
it.
out of our reserves or we
Right.
go get a loan and figure it
Right.
out from there.
I would confirm that we could enter into a GMA lease,
Yeah, I'll
After the
talk,
fact,
I'll
but I
talk
would-
to them tomorrow.
but with that said, I say we just go ahead and pay it out of ARP.
Let me circle back to the GMA lease. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
That lease, sorry, is bumper to bumper warranty. But how long do we have a bumper to bumper warranty on this new fire apparatus?
Well, yeah, what is that? Did you talk to them about the warranty in there? I didn't.
The warranty, it should be down in the package, but it's not in that. That's something I'll have to look over and I'll get back with you.
See if I see it. Yeah, it's whatever, I'm sure
It's going to be whatever you got on the ladder truck.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And another thing, he advised that if we did a letter of commitment to this truck, they could hold that truck.
Yeah, he told me today, if I issue a purchase order in the morning, like just give Mr. Carroll, do a purchase order and us sign and give it to them, they hold it. Like they're ready, they're ready to go, they just need us to get. I don't see it in here, we'll have to ask him, not on
I
the,
think go ahead and issue it, let them go ahead and hold the truck and then figure it out, get those questions answered on the worst case scenario.
We know we need to buy it, we're
Right.
gonna buy it. We just
Right.
don't know how we're gonna.
So it wouldn't
pay for
really
it.
take a budget amendment, would it, if we used ARP money?
Yeah, because we got to book it as an expenditure and a revenue, don't we, Lonnie?
what you talking about, when?
If we spend it out of ARP
ARP,
money,
it's
I
ARP,
still
yeah.
have to do a budget amendment because I got.
Yeah, I would still be bringing a budget amendment to you. I just wanted to find out, what the, where we were and your concerns about it before we did all that. Yeah, I'd be bringing a budget amendment to you.
If we're in dire straits, as I think it seems like that we are with the uncertainty of those other trucks, I don't think we have a choice though. Sounds like y'all made a good argument to use ARP money to fund it, and I think predicated on your discussion with GMA to cover ourselves in the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Assuming that's affirmative and the warranty, I'll make a motion to move forward with it.
I went to the warranty package. Here's some warranty from there.
The worst they could do.
For the,
I don't know if you did that way, but you did these. So
Yeah.
if you-
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm not saying we get 1.3, but
Right.
yeah, it wouldn't be.
And the bottom line, if you're only going 4 years on it,
It's not gonna be too bad.
you could get some decent
You're singing over there.
rates.
And I think this is certainly something that this was designated, these funds were designated for, it sounds like, to help municipalities in these type of situations.
So staff's recommendation would be to authorize staff to issue a letter of commitment to negotiate financing terms, and before the expiration of the letter of commitment, to bring back council a recommendation for permanent financing. That work?
Yes, make that a form of motion.
The form motion, do I hear a second?
I'll say.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Head?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is it appropriate or okay to talk about what we were talking about earlier today? You alluded to it here about the ambulance service and the ability for them to help out and to possibly shoot for
We could, since the chief's here. Go ahead.
Chief, one of the things that I think everybody's been concerned about over this COVID crisis, there have been a lot of concerns about the ability to have response by the ambulance service, and I know that this is just a crisis situation, But you're talking about, you know, literally life and death situations sometimes. And so, you know, in thinking about this, and it keeps, you know, I'll have people say, gosh, I had a situation, and I did have somebody with a neighbor, was close to being just non-responsive. And in the end, there wasn't at the time an ambulance available. And so the conversation went from there. But it brings up the question is how ready are we able to respond if there isn't an ambulance available? And so I know that the fire department has personnel that are available. And in, you know, in talking with Martha Ann McCarty, you know, they said, you know, there's some departments that have this thing called a licensed medical first responder unit that you can hopefully have most of the force, you know, as an advanced EMT status. That way,
It's not an advanced EMT.
okay.
It's your first responder. It's called a EMD, and it's an emergency first responder. But an EMT and a paramedic are two different things.
Yeah, sure.
The EMT can push some medications.
Sure.
The paramedic can push all medications. The EMT can get an airway started. We cannot get an airway started. We can start oxygen therapy. We can check your O2 levels. If you go into cardiac arrest, we can start there by CPR and defibrillation and everything. We can't do anything else. We check your blood pressure, glucose, and things like that. There's a training class that's coming up. Now, if it goes into that, then the city's gonna have to be able to, there's gonna have to be a medical director, and there'll have to be insurance available for our personnel that take this training and respond to these calls, because we still can't, we'd have to work within the scope of our training.
And so if you had that, you know, the ambulance service calls a pass on to a medical team in Macon that asks further questions and so that we would have to have a director assigned to this team at the fire department, right?
We have a medical director for us, but it's like on a first responder level.
Yeah. But are you saying we need to step to
You would need more, because we can't transport. We can't do any
Yeah,
transport.
sure.
But we can offer them as much training as we can get. And that, therefore, they would need to go through the EMD class and possibly an EMT. If you subcontract out an ambulance service to come in, then you could possibly have 2 ambulances there at all times, and then we could back up the ambulance service.
I guess the thing that I'm just thinking of is just in the situation we've been in to where we, you know, if you're a spouse at home or you've got a child that's had an accident, or, you know, and at that point you don't necessarily have an ambulance available. You want the best trained people that you can have, and that level is going to be at the fire department probably.
Yes.
And so I guess I want to begin the conversation of saying, how can we, through training, move to a higher level of preparedness so that if we need to, we've got people that can get there and be trained at either. Now, I was thinking that there was an EMT and then there was an advanced EMT and then paramedic.
We have several EMTs that are employed by the city.
Sure. Right.
And we have one paramedic that is employed by the city. Now, when he arrives on the scene and he's operating out his scope of what he's in then, and he don't have the medication or to push the different drugs that he need to push because the ambulance is not there. We don't stock drugs at the station. or anything like that.
So my question, what are your feelings though about trying to move towards something like this licensed medical first responder type status?
I have no issues with that. But the thing about it is that it's still just gonna be first responder.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get an EMT. You know, the whole thing goes back to, if you want the best service for your loved ones when we arrive on the call, then put us 2 contract ambulances in our station that respond along with us. If we get on the scene first, we got everything ready to go, and they come in, they give the medications or whatever they need to this patient, and transport them to the nearest hospital that they need to go to.
I guess there would be nothing stopping you from having, hiring an EMT,
No.
if assuming the money was there. Who at least, at that point, didn't have an ambulance, but at least could join on the ride as a first responder to be able to.
But then we're gonna have an issue with payroll, salary compression with that.
Oh, yeah, well, that create a bigger, question or situation to talk about. I'm just hypothetically,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to transport in one of your units, but at least to sustain the victim or not victim, or the patient, for lack of a better term.
Even when the EMS gets on the call, we're steady doing the CPR, we're doing everything.
If should there be drugs that need to be pushed, you would be able to have that.
We couldn't have it in the station, we'll have to be on that ambulance.
Okay, so even if you had a certified EMT, you couldn't stop the drugs in the station.
No, sir.
To take a bag with him to go out with him.
No,
Okay. Well,
Well, so I wish I could suggest that, Russell, maybe we begin a conversation with,
I'll get with Chief and
yeah,
we'll
and just
we'll
sort of
sit
think,
down and figure
and
something
think,
out.
what would be a goal we could get to so that we have maybe a better ability to respond if
Well, I would
we.
love to have 2 units in our station with contract EMTs there. It's just up to whether the city or however the entities that are involved would like to proceed and what it's gonna cost the city.
And maybe Martha would be somebody to lean on for advice too.
True, and my understanding is that the city can't act autonomously through that contract, as we're currently not a party to the zone contract. That contract is with the county.
Mhm.
Right. I mean,
We've had some discussions, and I think further discussions need to happen.
okay, well, then we don't need to take any more time on it, but I just want to bring it up.
Mayor, the next item for council's consideration is the authorization and adoption of the presented alcohol ordinance. Headed G7. I won't spend a lot of time elaborating on the details, as we went through the majority of them at the last meeting. I'll try to pinpoint some highlights, and if I omit anything, I'll ask the city attorney to catch me. But you can see on page 5 of 37, the original draft made reference to the fees being accompanied or held by the city clerk. We actually integrated those fees into the ordinance, and you can see by class the recommended fees for the particular license. And for those joining via YouTube, we now have 16 different classes of alcohol license that will be available within the city. You'll also note that the bar license will not be effective until February 1st of 2022. Because we're only offering 2 licenses within the DDA, we need to determine the methodology to make those applicable, whether we're going to do a lottery or whatnot. And this gives us a little bit of time to do that. On page 9 of 37, you'll see here that this is with regards to the security camera requirement that People who are renewing their license shall have 6 months to bring the property into compliance. On page 10 of 37, S subsection 1 through 3, this changes the distancing requirement for restaurants with regards to pouring on premises for distances from churches, schools, and college campuses, whereby that was 100 yards, has been reduced to 5 feet.
How much?
5 feet is basically a zero lot line, and the intent was for downtown. The state law changed this past year that gave local authority to city councils to regulate distancing, and this is for pouring and consumption on premise only. It's not for package stores. You'll also notice that it's only for restaurants, and it's not permissible for bars, should they be permitted, or it's not applicable for special events. People are having special events, they still have to meet the distancing requirements from churches.
So this is for restaurants?
Yes.
Pouring.
One question I did have for Deanne, I thought, and we can work through this, but on page 10 of 37, 627 subsection B makes reference to times of consumption. Right now, I believe we cap that at midnight. This extends to 2 a.m. for a particular type of license, but since we're rebranding licenses, how would that affect current license holders from now until January 1st, 22?
We are gonna have to make some decisions on those, the
Right.
ones that are currently in place, and how, you know, if they automatically go to this time frame.
So we'll do an administrative memo, if it pleases the council, with regards to alcohol consumption for those extended hours.
So you're saying you would allow to go from 12 to 2?
Yes, but since we're changing, see, we got this many licenses now, and we're going to this many.
Right.
And they may not be classified the same.
I see.
Since we specified which class roles,
I got who extended.
we're gonna have to make a decision based on the current licensing class, which one would be applicable. Let's see. 629 on page 11 of 37, again, requires that all persons wanting to seek an alcohol license have to be in compliance with all city ordinances, specifically including, without limitation, all of the ordinances that are related to maintenance of the physical location, specifically property maintenance violations. Persons who seek a new license, they will have to be in 100% compliance with property maintenance issues. And for renewals, I think we've given everybody a 12-month on a renewal to bring the property in compliance. Another big change on 11 of 37, 641 subsection B requires, and this is for package sales, that anybody selling package has to maintain $7,500 worth of inventory, excluding alcohol and excluding lottery tickets, to be eligible to hold a package license within the city of Thompson. For renewals, they will be given 12 months to come into compliance with a standard. For all new licenses, it will be mandatory before the license is issued. Page 14 of 37, this is specifically with the bar license, and I think this is something that I added, subsection A, the last sentence. No individual shall be allowed to have an ownership interest individually or through any legal entity in more than one bar license. We're giving 2 out. We don't want the same person to own both of them.
What number was that?
That is C2 subsection A, the last sentence.
And Russell, when you say only 2 allowed, it's 2 within
The
downtown?
DDA.
Yeah. And then, is there any,
Well, the question was asked, I believe as Councilman Tucker brought the point today, are we being too restricted? And my response was, one, I think the council has made a great statement in putting emphasis on the redevelopment of our downtown core. I think this is a step in doing that. And two, it's a lot easier to expand the footprint of the license than it would be to rein it in. If we made the license citywide, it's hard to rein that in after we issue it. So my recommendation would be that we start with two, we start with the DDA, we see what the public safety response is, we see what the response is within the downtown corridor, and if it's managed well, then, you know, we potentially expand that.
But that restriction is only within the DDA, right? It's not in the city but beyond the DDA area?
No license is issued outside of the DDA, period.
Oh, okay.
And that's what my concern, I mean, was that obviously my district goes beyond the DDA. And, you know, as all the development and things seem like they're pushing on the north side across the bridge, I don't want to preclude anybody who may have an interest in opening a bar up there. I don't want I understand what the premise was and what we're trying to do with downtown, but I agree with, let's see how it goes, but what I want to make sure that, you know, the people that are watching is that we're not going to, it's not, you know, forever that, you know, we're saying right now, nobody will get a license outside of the DDA. I don't think that's what we're saying right now.
And I would also caution that the alcohol ordinance is being adopted before your zoning ordinance, not in conjunction. And there are probably some commercially zoned, spot zoned properties within the city whereby you may not want a bar, right? So we need to fine tune our zoning, get our designations right before you open up those commercial districts, or you're gonna have a bar popping up somewhere you don't want it. By relegating it to a much smaller confined footprint, we have greater control as an exploratory measure to see how bars are gonna work. You know, to my knowledge, it's probably been a while since we had a bar. Obviously, they went away legally for a reason. And now we're trying to gradually, you know, with some calculated thought, reintroduce that.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's got a district that stands out beyond the DDA. And I just don't want people to think that we're never going to allow a license down the road outside of the DDA. I mean, I think that's, if that's what we're trying to do, then I'm not sure I'm okay with that.
And I would agree with what Ryan says. Let me ask you though, how are you going to determine, what if you had 10 people?
My preference would be that we do it via some sort of RFP with developmental credits for redevelopment projects. I don't know if that's going to meet legal muster in the criteria for issuance of a license. Absence of that, we'll probably do some sort of lottery. There would be conditions placed upon that lottery that to be eligible you have to meet, but essentially it will be luck of the draw at that point. And part of that is the reasoning we delayed the onset until February to give us a little bit of thought time to couch that up.
Well, by then, we should have the zoning nailed down, and this is certainly something we can further discuss.
We've got to walk before we run, so I
We
mean,
do,
I get
and
that.
We've got several things we got to nail down before then, so.
Operate with that assumption that if somebody reading this ordinance saying, gosh, they don't want anything outside the DDA, I just want everybody to understand who's watching why that is, that we've got to kind of get this figured out, get zoning hammered out.
A control locale also provides some benefit to our first responders.
That's right, that's right.
I mean, if they're spread out.
I just wanted to clarify, I disagree totally with what you're proposing. I just didn't want anybody to see that and just think, rather us be transparent with it.
The brown bag,
Yes.
change that.
What did we change? Just the
We
fee?
changed it, we had that, the owners or anybody at the restaurants couldn't touch the bottles, but then Councilman Tucker brought up a good point about recorking or putting them in a sealed, clear bag.
Right.
And so we added that, we changed it.
So you can seal it now.
No, good. That way you don't, like I said, have somebody at the door wanting to kill them, you know, a half a bottle of wine before they walk out the door and get in the car. They at least take it with them.
Yes, sir. One of the things we did too, page 21 of 37, Under our current ordinance, a special event permit is only good for 1 day. Under this ordinance, we allowed it to go up to 3 days, but the cost for the license goes up incrementally for each day that you add. So for 1 day, it's $350. For 2 days, it would go up $150, and then third day it would go up. The additional thing we did was we doubled the fee if the event is held on a holiday or a holiday weekend. That's not meant to be a deterrent, but like it goes with employment of officers, or whenever I have to have staff to work on a holiday weekend, whereby a special event permit. Now recall, special event means that it dictates some use of public resources, whether that be a street closure, whether that be the fire department, whether that be the police department. We have to have personnel on site. So my recommendation is that if we do permit event on a special, on a holiday or a holiday weekend, that fee be doubled. Page 29 of 37. I don't know if we talked about this at the last meeting, but for someone to hold a alcohol license in Thomaston, that person applying, one, they have to have financial responsibility in the business. Two, they have to live either within 30 miles of the city of Thomaston, and if they do not, they have to designate an agent who does live within 30 miles of the city of Thomaston. And the agent is clearly defined in the ordinance as someone, I believe they have to work at least 30 hours a week, have to have policy discretion over employees, et cetera, et cetera. So in absence of them living within 30 miles and in absence of them designating an agent or an employee that lives within 30 miles, they will not be eligible to hold a license.
They would accept service for the licensee. Both of those parties, the licensee and the agent, would sign a consent order that the licensee would designate that person as their registered agent, so to speak, and the agent would clearly agree to the terms.
The only other point I had to bring out on page 35 of 37, this is the entertainment district, so to speak, that we're enacting with open container within the prescribed area, that this provision of the ordinance not be effective until January 1st, 2022. And the reason is I've got Taylor and the chief working on some signage to designate the district downtown. And we also have a provision that we need to order cups, we need to get the signage, we need to make the public aware before we drop the ordinance in effect. We can enable it sooner, but think this gives us enough time to make all those changes. So I think I hit the high points. And staff's recommendation is to authorize adoption of the ordinance as presented, with the understanding that the city attorney and I will draft an administrative memorandum for the current license class and how certain provisions of the ordinance will be applied to those classes if they're not specified in the current draft.
One thing we need to talk about is the residency requirement. I don't know how that applies to anybody who has a license right now and whether they all meet that criteria already. Potentially they do, but if not, I just want to make sure that we either grandfather them in.
They would be given 12 months to name an agent. That's my recommendation.
So we need, you have the recommendation, we need a motion to adopt this ordinance, the Ryan Tucker ordinance. I mean the, how we named it?
They all run together.
To Do I hear a motion to adopt this alcohol ordinance?
I'll make that motion to adopt.
Have a motion to hear a second.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Grahams?
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Hay?
Yes. Next item for discussion is discussion and authorization of execute the moratorium resolution. You should have a copy G6 with your packet that specifically says that with the adoption of the new alcohol ordinance in anticipation of no change in zoning requirements for self-storage facility, those portions of the current moratorium which relate to the application of alcohol license and building permits for self-storage facilities be and hereby are deleted. So what that means in practical terms is that for convenience stores that were currently precluded citywide under the moratorium, for existing convenience stores, they can now apply for a new alcohol license. For new construction or the new building of convenience stores, then they would not be eligible to apply for permits. Same goes with self-storage units. I think that the city council has heard from a concerned business owner, and having discussed all of the possible zoning iterations with our consultant, in none of the iterations are interior storage facilities precluded from commercially zoned properties. I think the one in particular is industrial, so it goes above and beyond. So I think, well, actually I know when we get the zoning designation, what the request is would not be precluded under future zoning. So knowing that, in consultation with the city attorney, have no problem with recommending that provision of the zoning moratorium be lifted. So staff's recommendation is to authorize and approve the resolution as presented.
And that was for self-storage facilities, not just interior.
Right. But self-storage is currently only permitted in industrial zones, so. And that's gonna line up with our proposed zoning modification.
You've heard that recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Well, Russell, just help me again, just so we're extending this.
And we're deleting the provision for alcohol licenses for existing convenience stores, and we're lifting the entire moratorium with regards to self-storage units.
So they can come and make application
Yes.
again.
And the basis behind that is we have now adopted our alcohol ordinance, and we have worked through the process with our zoning consultant to a point sufficient to know that the zoning designations are actually going to be more lenient for interior storage and the same for exterior. So knowing that there will not be any change, we have no problems with lifting that, or recommending that it be lifted.
This goes to alcohol license, not, it doesn't lift anything or delete anything about the convenience store moratorium. It's just alcohol license.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Hear a second?
So,
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Grahams?
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Hay?
Yes. Next item for council's consideration is the authorization to purchase the furnitures and fixtures for the new fire department. Lonnie, you got that handout? Do we already?
There's the second page on there, on the handout that I gave you with the pumper truck.
Okay. I lost mine. I'll
Okay,
let
well,
you.
that's not uncommon.
We have
I got another copy for you.
So what he has is a copy of the budget. We asked him to put together the original budget, what was presented for furniture and fixtures, the contingency amount, what has been billed to contingency via change order to date. And you'll see that we're still within contingency. There's $25,000 left, that we had budgeted $95,000 for furnitures and fixtures. The total recommendation from our architect was in the amount of $82,682.61 from Malone's. They received pricing from 2 vendors. It is under the estimated FF&E that was attached with the budget and consistent with the architect's recommendation, considering all the budgetary data that's been presented. Staff's recommendation is to authorize the purchase. Normally, via contract bid, we wouldn't have to bring it back. The furnitures and fixtures were outside the contract and it exceeds the $25,000 that the city manager has authorization to expend. So, want to get the chief moved in before Christmas.
You said it was attached to the,
Yes, sir, it was on the back of that page, the long, this, that second one, you're looking at it, right here. So this shows like the original, and then, all the change orders coming out of there, and the contingency left at the bottom.
Chief, I assume you're good with all the furniture that's included in the bid?
I am, we looked at it, and we know some of it, yes. One thing I would like to ask, I think some things were not added to that in the F&E, like the television and different things on that, that balance that's left, what we gave to purchase, those things out of it?
It depends. They may have charged it to contingency,
Okay.
but I can check that, yes.
I'll make the motion, approve the bid for the furniture.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
yes,
Councilmember Head.
Yes. Next item for council's consideration is acceptance of the bids. We had 2 police trucks, one blue in color, one silver. VINs ending in 7368 and the other one VIN ending in 3463. We received, was it 21 bids, I believe, for the trucks, and the high bid on both of the trucks was Tidal Wave Auto, one in the amount of $39,500 and the other in the amount of $38,500.
Boy, they're all over the place, weren't they?
They are, and staff's recommendation is to accept the high bid and authorize the city clerk to execute any paperwork necessary for the transfer of title.
So moved.
A motion to hear second. Motion and second.
Amazing.
Discussion. You're already selling your other ones.
In case you didn't know, that is a substantial amount more than what we paid for the trucks 3 years ago.
Hearing no further discussion, call for a vote.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
yes,
Councilmember Head.
Next item for consideration is authorization of expenditure for Hannis Mill Road Reservoir fencing. Council may be aware of the adjacent property was purchased by a developer per se who has platted the lot. In the conduct of the survey, it was determined that the fence encapsulating Hannis Mill Reservoir is actually laid on what appears to be private property. So what we have here is pricing to remove the old fence and to reinstall a fence on city property. And the recommendation from the water department is to go, hold on here, $28,080 was the low bid, which is from B&D Fence Company, one of which is the demolition work and one of which is the laying of the fence. They were the cheapest of the 3 bids.
Typo.
Is that what he put in his recommendation? So, be not to exceed 28,250 would be the recommendation. We can figure out this amount, and then he's still low bid.
Right. You've heard that recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
this was all, is this a budget amendment, or is this?
This will be spent out of our rebatable account through the water department. Because
Okay.
it's over $5,000, they cannot expend it out of their account. Because it's over $25,000, I need to bring it to city council. So it would be funded out of their rebatable account.
I hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Greathouse?
I have to abstain, I'm related to the person that made the bid.
Councilmember Middleton?
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves? Councilmember Net?
Yes.
You have two notices attached with the back of your packet. One is ribbon cutting. Make sure I get the name right. It's at the park at Lake Thomas. Lakeside Park. Public Works crews have done a good job. They've got some parking available. We've got some boulders placed. They're working on some outside exercise equipment with the pull-up bars and some different things. I think Kyle said they were building a yoga platform overlooking the lake. So I would invite everybody to come out on the 8th to join us. Also, a meeting reminder for tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And again, this is envisioned to be town hall style from anybody who has any property maintenance questions, building inspection questions, permitting inspections, plan review questions, you name it. I've got code enforcement and our building inspector coming. So if council has any questions, or if we have any questions from the general public, there'll be a time to answer those questions. But Mayor, that's all I have, other than a brief executive session concerning personnel and real estate.
All right. Does anybody have any other business?
Yeah, I would, Mayor, and I'll try to keep this quick. I don't know what time it is. I had, in light of some of the things that have been happening around the community with crime related, about a week, 10 days ago, I asked the chief to put together some statistics for me. That I had some concerns and had some constituents that had some concerns regarding the criminal activity going around that's been happening, unfortunately, in the city of Thomas. I'll just share a few of these stats, and it's quite alarming in my mind, and I think it certainly is deemed to be discussed, particularly in light of what happened, was that Saturday, Sunday evening with the shots that were fired over at, was that at Park Street? I told them just to give me some stats, 12 months, year over year. They actually gave me an 18-month comparison. So you've got January of 18 through August of 2019, and then the same time period in 2021. Shots fired calls went up, were 54% increase, 18 months over 18 months. Incidents with a gun involved were up 60%, 18 month over 18 month. Homicides, which a little bit skewed, there wasn't a whole lot of them in the 2018 and 2019 time frame. We had 1, and we had 6 from January 2020 to August of 2021, which is a 600% increase. Now, again, that increase is large because we didn't have a lot, thank God, but 1 is too many, and 6 certainly is, even more so. Aggravated assaults, we had 45 compared to 79, which is a 76% increase. Given the, and Chief and I, again, this was at my direction request, we had extensive conversation, and we are right now at best a reactive police force, and step in anytime you want to, Chief. Given the call volumes that they're experiencing and how many calls they're working per shift per officer, there's not a whole lot of time that's meant for proactive type policing. And if these statistics aren't glaring to tell us that something needs to change, I don't know what is. And you know, it's something that I think we need to seriously consider. The chief brought up crime suppression units. I think that I don't know what else that we need to see in order to do whatever we need to do in order to make this happen. You know, I've asked Russell too, some of this ARP money Again, we're in the interim type things. If some of that can be used for at least for maybe not personnel, but whatever the expenditures can help offset some of the expense. But again, I'm not asking for a decision tonight, but I think this is something that, for the safety of our citizenry, I don't think we can continue to operate in a proactive manner, and that we need to give the chief, some flexibility and from a budgetary concerns. And I know we got budget time upon us, but I'm not sure if the suppression unit can wait. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take. God knows we don't need any more homicides, nor any of these other things that could lead to such. But I mean, when I read these numbers and 18 month over 18 month, they were shocking. And we ought to do what we need to do in order to take a more proactive approach. And I won't belabor it anymore. But Chief, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to those numbers. But
Yes, I can add a lot to make the argument on crime suppression if you want. Is that it?
We're going to discuss some of that.
okay, well,
Some of the things that I would like to discuss pertaining to particular incident.
okay. Well, again, I know it's late, but I think we've got to be cognizant of this, and we need to do something. We need to do it quickly. Thank you.
Anybody have any other business before we go into executive session?
Georgia won.
Georgia did win.
That's
Auburn
good.
did too?
Yeah.
Georgia Tech. Who's Georgia Tech? He's Georgia Tech fan. I'm what happened there. Say what I want.
Wow.
Call it by that.
Hard win money is.
Michigan? They got a football team? All right. Anybody have any other business? I would like to thank all the city and staff and those citizens that reached out on the death of my father this week. It was kind of unexpected, but I appreciate the thoughts and prayers for our family during this difficult time. So, and that, I need a motion to go into executive session for.
You did a really good job.
Thank
You did.
I'll make that motion to go into-
I'll make the motion.
you. Motion and a second. Any discussion of that? Call for a vote to go into executive.
Councilmember Greathouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Yes.
Councilmember Hatt?
Yes.
Please, Mayor, I'm going to ask Finance Director. He's got some numbers with regards to art funding.
Okay. He can stay. We get Lonnie overtime.
See you. Too. Anybody else like it?
6 or 7.
Yes. I'll send it to everybody. How about that?
We're back in regular session now. We need a motion to amend the agenda.
If it pleases the council, staff's recommendation would be to amend the agenda. First item would be to appropriate $225,000 for the purpose of funding crime suppression unit for the Thomaston Police Department, which would include 1 sergeant position, 1 corporal position, and 2 patrolmen. The second agenda item would be to appropriate $90,000 for the hiring of 2 additional code enforcement staff.
Make a motion, we amend the budget accordingly.
Our motion, or here a second.
Sorry.
Any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Councilmember Craig.
Aye.
Councilmember Middlebrooks.
No.
Councilmember, say no.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucker.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Yes.
Councilmember Head.
That's all I got, man.
All right. Is there any other business we need to reach?
No.
I was just gonna mention the fact that the 225 covers the salaries, but we've gotta talk about purchasing the cars and
The 225 covers the
Staff.
salaries,
Staff.
stuff. Staff.
like the salaries.
Yeah,
So,
we gotta equip them.
Equip 'em.
We'll work on that.
Okay.
There's nothing else. I hear a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I take it as on the. Where we at?
Okay, y'all have a good night.
Long night.
Thanks for what you did.
You guys drop safe.
Just in the meeting.
I think we covered it all.
No. I don't think we did.